He just could not get past the bad experiences he's had about Christianity. And I'll never forget it. He just kind of dropped and he said, that's exactly what's going on with me. And I remember thinking to myself, thank goodness.
Let's just dive right in. We're going to talk about a conversation you had. Why don't you set up that conversation?
This was with a guy, I would call him a agnostic. And I remember we're sitting there talking and I finally just said, hey, listen, do you believe in God? And he said,
This week on the Reach Podcast. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Reach Podcast. I'm here this week with one of my favorite people, Dave Wilson, who's Search's area director in Nashville. Dave, thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Full disclosure, we used to work together for a long time in Nashville, and
I'm still recovering from that, actually.
Are you really?
Yes.
Yeah, me too. No, Dave, seriously, thank you for making the trip down to Fort Worth to be here and to do some of these podcasts with me. So let's just dive right in, okay?
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about a conversation you had, and so why don't you set up that conversation?
Yeah, so this is with a guy that I would call him a agnostic.
Okay.
And we met through a mutual friend. And I can remember the first meeting we had, and we were just kind of talking, and it was a restaurant in downtown Nashville, and I couldn't figure out, we talk about try to figure out where somebody is in their spiritual journey, help them take the next step. I couldn't figure out the first part. And I remember we're sitting there talking, and I finally just said, hey, listen, I got to ask you a question. I said, do you believe in God? I mean, let's just start. And he said, yes. And I said to him, I don't know if it's the right thing, but I said to him, I got to be honest with you, I'm kind of surprised you said that, just based on our conversation. And then I asked him, I said, well, do you believe God is involved, or do you believe he just created things and is letting it roll down a hill? He said, I think he's just letting it roll down the hill. I said, okay, so at least I now knew where the starting point was.
Yeah.
And I said, man, I'd love to talk to you more about this. And he says, well, I got a lot of questions. And I said, okay, well, that's what we love at Search, right? We love questions. So we started meeting at his house every Wednesday morning. And he had a lot of questions. And they were the questions about why so many religions. He had a lot of friends that were in other religions, and, why you Christians believe this or so narrow and that kind of thing. And I remember once he was at a wedding and he was in a wedding, was even texting me a question while he was from a conversation he was having, and so the questions were just coming and coming. And so we would be meeting, and I thought, he would ask a question, we'd address it for that hour at his kitchen table. And I thought, okay, that one's done. Let's go to the next one. And what I found out as he was continuing to ask questions, we weren't really ever done. The one that I thought we were done kept kind of sneaking back in a different form and different question. And to be honest with you, after a while, I was probably meeting over there, I'm trying to remember, probably 4 or 5 weeks, 4 or 5 different times. And I began to realize, you know what, I'm not getting anywhere. And we're just having the questions. And, I kind of want to check it off and go to the next one. And you can't have that many questions. So we're going to nail these off, and I'm going to baptize you in the river. And it just didn't happen. And the questions kept coming and coming. And I finally was kind of discouraged, and because I felt like I didn't know if this was a game, if this was legitimate. And so I called a mentor, a friend of mine at Search, and I explained the situation. And he said, hey, oftentimes people will ask questions just to keep you at bay, so you don't really get to what's really going on. And I said, okay, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so I went back. I said, hey, Bob, before we address this next question, here's what here's what I was thinking about. And I was talking to a friend, and he said a lot of times, people ask questions because it's really something else that's bothering them. And I'll never forget it. He just kind of dropped his head and he said, that's exactly what's going on with me. And I remember thinking to myself, thank goodness we can get to something else.
Yeah.
I said, what is it? He said, I've got an uncle in Florida. He's a born-again Christian. He's the most obnoxious person I know. I hate him and his family. I don't like to be around him. I don't ever want to be like that.
There's the heart of it. Yeah, right there.
That's the heart of it. And I just said, great, let's talk about that, And so we just started talking about it. And I'll fast forward. I was never able to get him off of that fixation. After several conversations and just asking him questions and talking to him about, hey, I'm sorry your uncle's this way, but, how did Jesus act and how did Jesus treat people and how did,
What would he say when you would mention some of those passages?
We would talk specifically about situations and that would give it a great opportunity to open the Bible and just go, look how Jesus treated this person and this person. And he's the one that didn't like hypocrites, and like you don't like the hypocrites. And, Blaine, it was hard because we just couldn't get past it. And I think he's just like, hey, all I know about Christianity is it's narrow-minded. And these people are just obnoxious to be around. And I asked him, I said, do you feel that way about me? And he said, no. And I said, okay, well, can we, let's talk about, and I'm trying to bring him back to the source, which is Jesus, not an uncle or not a bad experience or a bad neighbor or whatever. And we still meet. We still have conversations. I always try to go, let's talk about the source. Let's not talk about, the political this or the religious, whatever the church agenda, it's like, and, he's open, talking about his kids and how he's going to raise them. And that gives us opportunity for conversations. But that conversation we had was tough because he just could not get past the bad experiences he's had about Christianity or Christians.
Yeah, and that's a great example. I mean, a lot of people have that objection, right? But even if it's not that, this is really a great way to talk about how do you deal with those conversations that just don't go the way you hope they would. And I guess that'd be my question to you is, so when that happens and you feel like you've done a good job and you've shared some accurate thoughts that maybe are different than what he was thinking, and yet at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, it's not convincing. How do you process that personally?
Well, honestly, it was discouraging, because at first I was discouraged, and then I got this advice, and I went, okay, I'm going to go back in. Then there was a breakthrough, and I was all encouraged about that we're now talking about the real issue. But then that just kind of petered out. And I think for me, what I've tried to do is maintain the relationship, meet with them. We don't meet every week anymore. He pretty much said, we're done. I don't want to do this anymore. And I said, yeah, sure. I said, but I'd love to, grab lunch periodically. He's like, oh yeah, absolutely. So every time, I initiate, we have lunch and we talk, we kind of pick back up and talk about, because he kind of knows where I'm coming from. But it's, he just, I guess for me, because there's a lot of others, and we've heard other stories and where it's like, I had this conversation, they had this question, we worked through it, and it ends up great, and those are awesome, and those are encouraging. It's cool to see God working, but God's working in this one too. It might be harder to see. And I think for me, to answer your question, what I've been focused on is just maintaining the conversation, allowing to allow to go where he will allow me. At one point we started to study back up in his office with a couple of his coworkers and friends.
Yeah.
And then he stopped that, so, and that I wasn't going to force it. Right. But so it's a tough series of conversations, and this has been going on for 3 or 4 years. And I'm just trying to keep that voice. I'm trying to keep the relationship, just, make sure I'm not doing what upsets him about Christianity, and just have an honest conversation and just trying to go back and go, let's look at what Jesus did. Let's look at what Jesus said. Let's look at how he acted and treated other people.
Hey everyone, I'm so glad you're listening to the Reach podcast. Reach is brought to you by Search, a ministry that helps you share Jesus. If you like what you're hearing, you'll love the Reach series. The Reach series is our new self-paced video course that gives you what you need to build relationships and have conversations about Jesus in a way that fits you. It won't cost you anything, so check it out today at reachothers.org. Now, let's get back to the podcast.
And I think for our audience that's listening, I mean, this is not atypical. This, it's simple, I think, to share your faith in a certain sense. It's something we believe any Christian can do with confidence, and you
Sure.
can learn. That's what we're doing with Reach here, is trying to provide some resources. But it is not uncommon for things to go this way, and so there's probably a healthy reality or dose of reality we all need to have of like, this is not a results-oriented thing.
Yeah.
That God is in charge of people believing. Changing their minds is not within our pay grade. And so sometimes it's tough sledding.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get to be there when God works a miracle and somebody they believe, the lights come on spiritually. Right. And so it's probably worth knowing for people that things don't always go well.
Right. And the other thing,
or I shouldn't say that.
Well,
they don't always go the way we would like them to go,
or we expect
from
them
the
to go.
way we are thinking about.
Right. Because, when you get together and you talk to other people doing this, you often only hear the good stories, and it's so easy to go, well, gosh, I'm not having as many good stories like that as they are. But the truth of the matter, I think you're right. More often than not, it's this. And I think just people are more distracted. They don't, he's busy at work and has his own company, and, there's just always something on the horizon that in his mind is more important than spending time thinking about this.
Yeah, and that's a big challenge
Yeah.
in the world. But for us and what we're trying to do here too at Reach, people are listening to learn how to better share their faith, and I just go, this is the way it goes. A lot of, like, it's not like, hey, you go watch everything Reach has and do everything and read those couple books back there. Man, you've got it. It's just gonna be easy. It doesn't really work that way, and we'd be lying to you if we were telling you.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to highlight a story like this to go, this is real.
Yeah.
This is how it goes sometimes.
Well, and you what you said earlier is right. I mean, it's above our pay grade, and if you think about it, that's a logical statement, because what we're talking about is a heart transition, a heart transformation, right? And I can't. There's no perfect PowerPoint presentation or speech or AI concocted, whatever.
Maybe AI could do
Maybe
something.
AI.
We'll see.
But there's really not, because it really is here. And I think all we can do, again, not knowing where we are in the process, is just maintain the relationship, be there for questions, respect when they say, I don't want to do this anymore. But, a couple months later, call up and go, hey, you want to grab lunch? Let's, and again, he may be having conversations with someone else right now, that a neighbor could have just moved in, and that you just never know. All you do know for sure. And I think what keeps me going, where I don't look at this and go, that was a failure. I think what keeps me going is, hey, I know our Lord is chasing after him, and he's going to use whatever means it takes to reach his lost child. And whatever role I can do, I don't know. I'm just trying to maintain the relationship and keep the conversation going.
And that's the perspective. That's one of the big things we talk about here, is that God's responsible for the results.
Yeah.
Meaning, in particular, it's God, like you said, that does the heart change.
Yeah.
And then however you work that out in your theology doesn't matter. But that's if we feel the weight of being the agents of somebody believing, you probably couldn't sleep at night.
Yeah.
Because you'd be so nervous you messed this up or
Right.
didn't do that or should have. I mean, you could
Yeah.
you drive yourself crazy. Some
Yeah.
people do.
Oh,
by the
no,
way.
now he's more lost after my conversation. Yeah, no, that didn't work.
Do you think that a lot?
I don't think so, no.
But I was just going to read this because this is the passage. By the way, the whole Bible's there's a 500 verses like this, probably.
Right.
But here's the one that we like to use at Search that talks about this. So in 1 Corinthians 3, he's writing to the church there, and they're fighting about stuff. Christians don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Thankfully,
No, that's in
it's
the olden
been a long
days.
time
We're
since
much
that's
more
going on.
sophisticated now.
But he says, so hey, what's Apollos and what is Paul? Servants through whom you believe, talking to the church there, as the Lord assigned to each. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. And it's pretty simple and straightforward, agricultural metaphor, but God is really the one that makes things happen. So I think it's good sometimes in a certain sense for us who are trying to live on mission to have some of these, these conversations that don't go the way we want to go, because it makes you trust God more. It goes back to, it's like, okay, do you really believe what we just read?
Right.
Do you really believe it? And if you do, then you'll be great,
And the reverse has happened too, where it's like somebody in a group, all of a sudden the light comes on and they, and you're like, well, I don't remember saying anything profound, I mean, there's nothing I could have pointed to, I can recall the story where, a guy named George that happened. And I'm like, how did that happen? We weren't doing anything, profound, or, we were in the Word, we're looking at stuff, but it was just God just working on their hearts. And that's all we can depend on and rely on, and just know to be true, that he sees his lost children and he's going after them.
Yeah.
And we get to be a part of it. And it's a fun part to be, it's a fun part to see and participate in.
So if you were to boil everything we've talked about down to one thing, one takeaway that you'd want everybody listening to just be able to remember and go implement in their life this week, what would that one takeaway be?
Well, so for me, there were engaging in a difficult process scenario, right? When I realized this isn't going to go like I had hoped, I learned something in that, hey, oftentimes behind the wall of questions, there's a bigger deal. There's a bigger issue. There's a real issue. And so my takeaway was that was really helpful to learn. Long-term takeaway is we're called to engage, and success is just that, to be engaged and ask questions and to be a friend and to just shed as much light and be as much of Jesus to them as you can possibly be. And the results, like you said, are truly up to God. And it's humbling at one level because you kind of want to be the guy that closes the deal, but that's not reality. And it's better that it's not, because it's a God thing. It has to be. And that's what we get to be a part of, which is really kind of fun, even when it doesn't go the way you want it to go. But it's still true. The circumstances do not change the fact that that's still the truth.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I think that's a great way to wrap up the podcast. Dave, thank you for being my guest. This was fun.
It was fun. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Reach Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. That'd be a good idea. Share it with a friend and leave us a review to help others find the podcast. Now, for more resources, please visit reachothers.org and follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and we'd love to hear from you.